Welcome to the Kimberly Cloud Show. I'm your host, Kimberly Cloud, and I interview industry changers from across the globe about their past, present, and futures in business, innovation, and life. I enjoy helping people build their portfolios and bring out the authenticity of their business. Let's get started with today's guest. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Kimberly Cloud Show. I'm your host, Kimberly Cloud. I have a very special guest here for the show today. Can you go ahead and announce to the world who you are and where you're calling from?
I'm Barry Adkins, Kimberly, and I am calling from the sprawling
Give me just a
metropolis.
second. Can you say that one more time?
My name is Barry Adkins, and I'm calling from the sprawling metropolis of Gilbert, Arizona.
Oh, wow. We were just talking about Arizona. Oh, that's a beautiful place. So I know you have a powerful story, and I want to get it out. Can you go ahead and tell me about your past and how it intertwined with the seriousness of what happened with your young adult child?
Yeah, so really, prior to July 10th of 2005, I was just your everyday middle-class American, raising kids, working lots, going to the store, buying a house, doing all that stuff, thinking I was, this is how my life is going to go, right? I'm just going to kind of cruise off into the future. And July 10th of 2005, my son died of alcohol poisoning on the day he moved out on his own. And my life changed forever. Prior to that, I was really just an everyday guy. I went to church and I would, help with pancake breakfasts and do all of that stuff. Since July 10th of 2005, I've told the story 300 or 400 times to a few 100,000 people.
Wow. My heart goes out to you, Barry. And can you tell me the story surrounding how it happened and who almost got charged with manslaughter, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, so I'll kind of tell a brief version of it. So
Okay.
Kevin had just graduated from high school. I remember him giving me a hug after the high school graduation ceremony and saying, "Thanks for not giving up on me, Dad," because he had his challenges in school. He got a job right out of high school making good money. I agreed to co-sign a loan so he could buy a new truck. I was hoping he'd find one at a private party. We'd go down to the credit union, sign papers, and be out of there in 5 minutes. Some of your audience may not like this, but we had to go to a dealership. And we know what happens at dealerships.
Yeah.
And this is kind of the past. I had to go down there to sign papers. The first thing the financial guy said to me was, "How about some life insurance?" And I'm that guy. I said, "I don't need any life insurance. My wife will do just fine if something happens to me." And he said, "I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about your son." And I rather indignantly told him that 18-year-old boys don't need life insurance because they don't die. But I was wrong. They do die. So a couple weeks later, he decided to move out. I honestly tried to talk him out of it, right? Because he was 18 years old and just bought a truck. And really, we never had any problems with him. His high school principal didn't even know who he was. And I considered that a good thing. But I didn't have any luck talking him out of it. So a couple of weeks later, his buddy Craig came over and they started the process of moving him out. Threw a bed, a TV, and a dresser in the back of his truck. That was his definition of moving out for the day. But I remember him coming into the living room before he left and telling me that he wasn't going to take his toothbrush with him. He'd be back tomorrow morning and get it. I walked out front with him like I normally do, gave him a hug, told him that I loved him and to be careful, watched him drive away. It was the last time I saw him alive. That night, his buddies decided to throw a little housewarming party for him. Started with beer, moved on to shots. He left a voicemail for his sister that night. It sounded pretty benign, right? They'd just been drinking, having a good time. He passed out a short time after he left that voicemail. The people at the party laid him in his bed on his side in case he vomited. But he's just passed out, so they went in and shaved his head and his legs while he was passed out, because he's just passed out, right? But his buddy Craig kept going back in to check on him. Around 4 a.m., calls started coming into 911. First calls were difficulty breathing. Next calls were not breathing. My son died alone in a hospital while I slept peacefully in my bed. The next morning was Sunday morning. My wife and I are just sitting around doing what lots of couples do on Sunday morning, drinking coffee, talking about what we're going to do that day. And the doorbell rings. And we looked at each other. We weren't expecting company. And I opened the door and I see two police officers and somebody in plain clothes at my front door. That should have been a big red flag. But I'm that guy. It didn't even occur to me that something bad had happened. One of the officers and the person in plain clothes stayed by the front door. The other officer walked in and stood in front of a brown chair that Kevin had sat in 2 weeks before and talked about how his life was finally beginning. He said there'd been an accident and your son is dead. We asked who, because we have a number of children. They said it was Kevin, and they handed me his driver's license. There's something pretty final about it when a police officer hands you your child's driver's license, because until that exact moment in time, you're holding out hope that this is all a big mistake. You need to be 3 streets over or next door, any place but my place. But when they hand you your child's driver's license, you know he's gone and he's never coming back.
Well said. My heart goes out to you again, Barry. And what have you done to keep the faith above all? To make sure his name is still heard?
I have shared the story hundreds of times, a few 100,000 people. There's another event that happened a couple days later that changed everything for me, Kimberly. I was angry with God. Let's be clear about that. I was angry with God. I told God, back up time, take me, let him live. And I told him in very unkind words that this wasn't right. A couple days later, it was about 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm going to describe this as best I can. Might need a little grace here. I'm laying in bed, and I can only describe it as I felt like someone came in the room. There was a light I'd never seen before and haven't seen since. And the message was very simple. He didn't suffer, and something very good would come from this. And before I could even think about it, the light was gone, and I'm left to wonder what something very good is. And that's what I've spent the last 19 years doing.
Tell me about how you traveled 1,400 miles between Arizona and Montana with Kevin's ashes in your backpack.
So there's a lot of thoughts. The grief process is different for everybody. There's just a ton of thoughts about what you're going to do, what you're not going to do. The process started with going to pick up his ashes, right? We had him cremated. And I remember going down to the funeral home, and you walk into a funeral home and they got nice pictures on the wall and they're playing music in the background. They take me into an office, sit me down a big comfortable chair, a big desk in front of me. Funeral director walks in, sets an urn down in front of me. An urn that holds all the remains of the kid that I burped, changed his diapers, coached baseball, basketball, soccer, football, taught him to shoot a gun and swing a golf club. All the remains of him were sitting in an urn in front of me. There's one thing I knew at that point, and that was that I didn't want to be a victim. Because the world doesn't need any more victims. We've got plenty already. The world needs people who take something bad and they make something good come from it. And I thought about what I would hope somebody else would do if it happened to their kid. And for me, the answer was pretty easy. It was to get out and tell a story. Not to raise money, because there is no money in the world that'll fix the hurt. The only thing that helps is to try to make something good come from it. And in the process of figuring out what to do with his ashes, I decided to walk from Arizona to Montana. For the older folks in the audience, the idea to walk actually came from the movie Lonesome Dove. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
I
Uh,
heard of it. I heard
Heard of
of
it?
it.
You should watch. It's got Tommy Lee Jones and Robert Duvall. It's got some bad language in it. I will warn you that. It's a Western, but that's where the idea came from. Um, in the movie, they did it on horseback. I knew I'd never make it on horseback. So I walked roads and I slept in hotels every night. But it was an incredible journey. Uh, I could go on for an hour about how cool it was.
At the end, how did you feel and what did you say? I have to know.
You know, it's funny when I wrote the book. I wrote a lot of stuff, and so I gave it to a book club to read, right? Because I want feedback from strangers. And I said, okay, tell me your favorite part about it. Okay, good, but I want to know what they didn't like. And the one I'll never forget, the one lady, she said, "You told me more about your shoe selection than you did about how you felt when you got to Montana." How I felt, it was a physical relief, right? Because there's a lot of things that can go wrong. Because I average 90 miles a week, right? There's a lot of things that can go wrong. I'm walking along roadways. It was a physical relief, but then this is where we're leaving, right? Which is sad, but you know that his spirit isn't there anyway. It's more for us here on earth than it is for anything else. But we had a little get together and we left his ashes up there and they're still up there.
How powerful is that? Oh, wow. Tell me about how your religious beliefs are and how you go day in and day out doing the right things to make sure Kevin name lives in a religious way.
Kevin was a Christian. I was a Christian as well, but you know, the Bible tells us all the time that God's in control, right? And that uh, he's going to give you challenges. Um, you don't wrap your head around that until it happens. And I think it's James that says, "Count it all joy, my brothers, when we meet trials of various kinds," right? Um, when you're going through it, there's no joy in it. But you realize when you sort of get to the other side that um, you're a different person. You're you realize that God is there and He is real, and you have to lean into Him really hard. You don't lean into yourself. I don't lean into myself anymore. Every time I speak, I just ask God, my voice, your words, Lord.
Well said. Um, what advice do you have to give to the parents that haven't came to terms with God yet, that are suffering with their children's loss? What good advice do you have? Because you done been around 200, equal up to 200,000 people. So you have some advice to give them. What is that?
Are we talking about parents that have lost children?
Yes.
So
Yes.
let's talk. Yeah, grief. For me, this is about 19 years in the rearview mirror, right? So one of the things that I really struggled with was that I wanted to feel the way I did on July 9th of 2005, the day before he passed away. It sounds a little bit harsh, but you're never going to feel that way again. The old you is gone. The old you died with your child. There's a new you there. That new you can be a better person, but you have to force that issue. We know lots of stories about. I've heard lots of stories about people losing their children and then parents turn to drugs or alcohol and get divorced and all that. And one of the things that we did from the beginning was we were not going to play the blame game. I never held a grudge against anybody at that party. We did not. Was there more things that I could have done on my end? You bet. You bet. We can talk about that. But you don't you don't play the blame game. If you play the blame game, it's probably going to destroy your life and your marriage.
What things have you done as far as could have done? Sorry, my apologies. What
Okay,
things you could have done?
that's a fair question. That's so you obviously you replay a lot of stuff, right? I talked to Kevin a lot about drugs. I made examples of lots of things. I didn't talk to him that much about alcohol because we had a relative that was a pretty serious alcoholic, and Kevin always talked about how stupid he was and how he was never going to let that happen. And so I thought he knew. A little more of the backstory there too is so Kevin's biological mother and I were divorced. I had custody of him. And when he got into high school, he started wanting to go over there and spend weekends at his mom's. And I thought, I'm naive, right?
Mm-hmm.
I thought, well, that's
Mm-hmm.
cool. Well, it turned out, at least on a sample of one, that letting them drink when they're younger is not a good idea because she was letting them drink over there. Their friends were going over there and having parties. And I don't hold any grudge against her. I didn't know about it till later. His friends told me about it. But, um, you know, it is what it is. The only thing I can do is go forward at this point.
Yes. I will admit, in my teenage years, my aunt used to allow me to drink, but I found God. Um, People that aren't drinkers could end up getting alcohol poisoning, and in your case, he suffered and he did. Um, how what kind of advice would you give the teenager? This is the flip side. The teenager out there that's Christian that is around their parents right now and they want to be a good Christian, but it's so many demons out here and people persuade you to do things and peer pressure come in. So tell me, what would you do? What kind of advice would you give?
So there's lots of topics there. Peer pressure you mentioned, and one of the things I when I talk to students all the time, I turn to the teachers and say, "How many people from high school do you really hang around with still?" And most of them it's like one or two. These people you think that you care about, that you care what they think about you, you're not going to know after high school. You may be friends with them on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram, whatever, but you don't really know them. For me, um, really, the two most important decisions that you're ever going to make are about drugs and alcohol. It isn't even close. We all know stories. You need to educate yourselves about the dangers of drug and alcohol abuse as if your life depends upon it. Because it just does. It just does. And the other thing I tell them three things. And the second one is about adversity. Bad stuff happens to everybody. Your parents are going to get divorced. You're not going to make the team. Your boyfriend or girlfriend's going to break up with you unceremoniously. All of those things. The way you respond to adversity is going to define your life. It
Well
really,
said.
notice I didn't say might, it will. And the third, and perhaps most important, is about this thing called forgiveness. It was easy for me to forgive the guys at the party because this was Kevin's choice. This was his decision. And it was easy for me to forgive my kid because that's what parents do. But there's one person that was really, really, really hard to forgive. And that was me. It took 1,400 miles and 5 pairs of shoes, but I have found a way to forgive myself. And I heard a pastor describe it best once. He said that anger and vengeance lead to one thing: destruction. Forgiveness leads to healing. And sometimes the most important person you need to forgive is yourself. Nobody's perfect. We all make mistakes. It's how we handle it that matters. And the Bible has a lot to say about forgiveness.
Exactly. How do you feel parents should start checking for cues for their children who are going behind their back and becoming intoxicated with alcohol or many other drugs?
So this is a tricky thing. There probably is. I'm not an expert in that field. I always say trust your gut. Um, but the one thing I tell people, because nobody ever really wants to have a conversation about drugs and alcohol, right? You're not going to walk in and say, "Sit down, we're going to talk about drugs and alcohol." But what I've learned through the years is that, and I tell this the same thing to parents and students, is people are always listening to what's going on around them. When husband and wife or parents are sitting there talking and the kids are around, they may be pretending like they're ignoring you, but they're listening to every word you say.
Yeah.
And I tell them you can get these Google alerts about alcohol poisoning or drug overdoses and stuff. Just start talking about it, just between the spouses and the kids. Believe it or not, they're still listening. And I tell kids the same thing. If you want your parents to engage in a conversation, let them overhear you say something on the phone.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that'll bring out that because starting the conversation for me seems awkward, right?
Hmm.
But that I think that gets the conversation started.
Well said. To piggyback off of you, I feel like there should be apps for not. I know bullying has nothing to do with alcohol poisoning, but for bullies, like and people that wants to use alcohol or drugs, but wants to do the right things. Like for instance, teenagers, all they need is a positive. Reinforcement like app so that they can talk about how peer pressure, because it all comes down to peer pressure. Sometimes
It
they don't
does.
even want to do alcohol, and like me for instance, I didn't want to use alcohol, but it looked cool, my
Yep.
family was doing it, so I just like, okay, I would do it. But this app can help so many kids gear towards finding more positive things to do, and they meet up with their parents' permission, of course. And maybe the parents can go to conferences with them and tell them their stories of how they overcame it and everything, And then it could be a Christian app or something, anything. But I wanted to know, how have you and your wife, overcome the boundaries of, you know, having, because you never get over it. You never get over it. And I just wanted to know, how have y'all agreed to find a sweet spot to talk about it and engage with other people, but to make sure that everyone knows that, hey, look, this is something that can happen to you if you take the time out and listen. Maybe because some parents think it won't happen to them. So, what is your input on that? Sorry,
Yeah.
so many questions.
No, no, no. No, you're right. That's why I say I'm that guy, right? I never believed anything was going to happen to me. You just never believe it's going to happen. And for my wife and I, we leaned into each other and on our faith, right? And the thing I so let's be clear. I'm not here to say that we should go back to the days of prohibition. We
Yeah,
can't get back there.
I
What
agree.
I tell students is wait until you're 21. If you wait until you're 21, the statistics tell us that you're all but guaranteed you're never going to have a problem. Anything before that, it's hard to tell what might happen. Did I drink before I was 21? Since you may ask that question, yeah, I did. I regret it. And it's only by the grace of God I'm sitting here today talking to you. But I understand now that those things were really, I'll use the word stupid, right? Those were stupid things to do. And they're fraught with risk. It's more than just alcohol poisoning, it's DUIs, it's addiction, it's all of these things. And if you wait until you're 21, I promise you, you won't regret it.
I agree, and not only won't you regret it, but it's nothing that you're missing. Actually,
No, you're
it's
not.
nothing really. I remember I was 15, and I got somebody that was outside on the street to buy me alcohol easily, and that's what I mean. Like, I became an alcoholic, barely, and I regret it. I regret it. I wasn't missing nothing. And so pretty much, if you're out there listening, Barry Adkins, he has a powerful story about his child expiring early, possibly due to, friends saying take this and making it look good. Not saying that that happened. Allegedly, he drunk willingly, but to let y'all know this is a powerful story, and Mr. Atkins go around telling people about his story, him and his wife. So where do you see yourself going in the future, Barry?
I'm going to keep doing this as long as I can. I want to go and tell the story, as we talked about a little bit earlier. I'll go anywhere and tell the story. I just need travel expenses, and if it's in Arizona, I don't even charge for that. I'll pay the gas, because I think this is my something very good. The phrase "something very good will come from this" was so vague, and I think the good Lord made it that way on purpose, because he knew that I would chase it the rest of my life, and that's what I plan on doing.
Okay, we have 2 minutes left. Can you tell me how the people can find you, Barry?
I'm not too difficult to find. My name is Barry Adkins. If you search for that on Facebook, it's Kevin's Last Walk, and that's the page I keep up to date with all the speaking stuff I do, all the podcasts. I post all of those on there. That's a good way to get a hold of me. The website is kevinslastwalk.com. If you want to send me an email, there's a place there that they can contact me. The book is on Amazon. I actually wrote a book, which was more work than walking to Montana, by the way.
1 minute. I welcome you to come back on to talk about your book too.
Yeah,
Okay,
we can
one
do
day.
that anytime.
Okay. I want to thank you guys for joining my show. I wanted to say that I had a nice educational time with Barry Atkins. You stay on the line, Barry. It was wonderful talking to you guys. Until next Friday at 1:30, I will see y'all another time.